This is probably the most serious slide in the whole entire deck right here. You know who this guy is? This is the elephant in the room, right? What is that? Buyer agent commissions, right? So I'm gonna do like 6 minutes on buyer agent commissions, and I wanna hear about it for the rest of the week, okay? Never again. I'm gonna give you guys everything you need to know about buyer agent commissions in this next 5 minutes. And here's the formula. D plus V equals 3%. All right, so this is basically a buyer consult system, right? Not a buyer presentation. This is a consultation like an attorney does, like a doctor does. Think about yourself in that way. If you want to be paid like a doctor and attorney, we got to act like a doctor and attorney. So what we're going to do is we're going to uncover the buyer's goals and dreams. We're going to discover the property needs. We're going to discuss compensation, and then we're going to summarize the whole thing with a strategic plan. I got a whole document for you guys to download that goes through this in very detailed information, questions that you can ask, all that stuff. I'll give that QR code to you at the end. But we're going to break this down. All right, discovery. If you don't do a thorough discovery process, you're never going to build trust and rapport with your client. Right? A lot of times we don't do this. We don't ask them what their hopes and dreams are. What are their big goals? Why are they moving? Like deep questions, not how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms do you need. So you got to start with really big, deep goals and dreams conversations, and then we get into the talking about property criteria. Because if we understand the big picture, the smaller picture they may not understand or they may not have a clear picture of it. We can help them get there, maybe guide them in the right direction, but we don't do enough discovery on the top end first with the big goals and dreams discussion. So let's focus on that first. And then understanding their priorities, right? Asking the questions of what is your timeline? What is your monthly budget look like? What's comfortable to you? What is important about the location? Is it proximity to the school or grandparents, medical centers? What is it to understand those types of things versus I want to be in Mililani, right? That's not a deep conversation. It's not a deep understanding of what the buyer is looking for. And then summarize the whole thing in a strategic plan. How many of you guys have, after doing a thorough discussion with a buyer, sent them back 2 paragraphs outlining exactly what you talked about and what you're going to do versus what they're going to do and what the mutual understanding is? Like that binds the whole thing together, right? And now you have a written agreement, right? A contract almost, where there's a clear understanding, like I don't show property on Sunday because I spend the day with my family and I go to church. Whatever it is, like have that discussion up front. So when Sunday comes along and they want to see property, you can say, hey, remember we talked about that? I'm gonna have my friend Tara show you property that day. Is that okay? Because we already talked about it. So summarize that big discussion in a strategic plan. All right, value. After you have a deep understanding of what the buyer's needs are, we got to dive into our personal value, right? And there's 2 ways you can do this. The first one is one-to-one, right? We do it in person, consultation, at the office, in a coffee shop, on Zoom. And there's a basic framework you want to use. Who you are, right? Share your experience, your resume. You need to come up with a good document that lays that out, what your experience is. What you do. I help families like you buy property in Ocean View all the time. Make that connection that I specifically do what you need me to do, right? That's what I do, that's who I am. And then how do I do it? I do it through X, Y, and Z. Come up with a script, a clear understanding of your process by looking at the MLS every single morning, sending you property updates, doing video tours for you. How are you gonna do what you said you're gonna do? Now this is important, and you have to do this. But if you really wanna be value squared, you have to do one-to-many. You have to do mass marketing. Right? You have to provide value to the marketplace before you ever speak to the customer. I just had a closing yesterday or the day before. The guy came to my office and picked up the keys. This guy called me on a Friday morning and said, hey, I appreciate all the video emails the last 3 years. I found the house that my wife and I want to buy. Can you write me the offer? Sure, give me the address. I look it up, it's 1.3 million. I write him the offer, we're in escrow the next day, quick 25-day cash closing. I didn't know the guy existed, but for 3 years, I was his realtor. He believed I was his realtor, even though I didn't know he existed, because somehow he got on my email list, right? So how many people are out there in the world that believe that you are their realtor and you don't know they exist? Ask yourself that question, because if there isn't a lot of them, it's gonna be a hard road coming up because you're gonna be competing with people who are doing that, right? So if you don't like how your hair looks or you don't like how your voice looks and you don't wanna do video and you don't wanna put yourself out there, maybe you should find a different job. Like that's all, it's harsh, but you gotta really think about that. Because we gotta be out there providing value to the marketplace. And this also works for agent attraction. Very rarely do I have an agent attraction conversation where they haven't already watched me on Instagram and YouTube and know who I am and are very comfortable with speaking to me, right? I don't have to prove credibility because they've already established that with them. So you wanna create clients that don't know you exist. And the outcome is inbound calls that I just talked about, right? The outcome is, if you look at any heavy hitter in this room that does a ton of business, they get calls where the first question is, are you taking on new clients? they don't have to have a discussion about compensation because they're expecting they're gonna have to pay because they're calling the best person in the market to help represent them, right? You want that inbound call to be, are you taking on new clients? That's the goal, that's the outcome from all of this discovery and value. All right, now 3% every time. This is all you guys have to know about talking about buyer's representation agreements and the compensation discussion. So only after a very thorough discovery process and value discussion is conducted, do you have a conversation about compensation. And this might be the most critical thing. Write this down, you guys. And this is important in all difficult conversations. You have to frame the conversation. If you don't frame the conversation in terms of most likely outcomes, people make assumptions and they draw conclusions, and then the discussion goes off the rails, okay? So you're gonna get this script, you don't have to write it down, but this is basically how the conversation goes. Is when you get to the point of discussion about compensation, you explain to the buyer, in the vast majority of cases, and then you insert market data. 97% of the time, sellers are still offering compensation for my services when we go and purchase a home. In the very rare case that a seller is not offering compensation and they're not gonna pay for your representation on your behalf, there's a couple of things that can happen. The first one is we can negotiate my compensation into the offer in the form of a credit from the seller to our brokerage. They'll cover my costs. It won't cost you anything out of pocket. We could also, in the case if you're a cash buyer, or if we just want to negotiate it into the purchase price, we can negotiate the purchase price down to compensate for the cost of representation. And that way, your net cost of buying the home is the same as it would have been if the seller was offering compensation. And in the very rare case, less than 1% of the time, when none of those options are available to us and we're not successful doing any of those things, my compensation may be part of your closing costs. And I'm gonna make 100% certain that you are comfortable making an offer on that home and what your closing costs are gonna be before we do that. Are you comfortable with that? What would you say to that conversation? Yes, right? Like, I mean, this will diffuse, again, 99% of buyers who are reasonable, good people who are gonna see your value because you did a good job are gonna be okay with this. But you're gonna ask me, right? But Dylan, what about the ones that refuse to pay a commission? Write this down, you guys. Good? 1% problem, right? 1% problem. Don't focus on that guy. Go out and find the 99 more that will pay you, right? You do not ever have to work for no compensation, ever. So don't worry about it. I didn't say it. My wife said, please don't say it. I said, okay, I'll just use it. I'll just put it on the screen, all right? All right, so if you want to download, there's like a 9-page guide with questions on how to build this whole entire discovery value, the script that we just shared right there. Just download the code, put in your information. You're going to get on my email list, so you'll get my weekly emails every Saturday with real estate tips, mindset advice, all that stuff. I will be spamming you, too bad, but it's going to be great information, all right? Okay, so we're going to end with this, you guys. I talked about speaking it to an existence, right? And I want to ask you guys, this is my one request for you guys this week, for the next 2 days, is write on your paper, what are you going to speak into existence? What are you going to tell your friends, your family, the people on your table that you're going to do in the next year, 2 years, 5 years? Because if you don't do it, it's not going to happen, right? The universe hears you if you speak it out loud. And so I want to give you guys an example of this. I'm going to tell you about how I got to EXP. When I did EXP, I came to EXP in December of 2018, so 19 was my first year. And today, 2022, we have the #1 team in Hawaii, and we ended the year as the number 20 team in all of EXP in just 4 short years here at EXP. Totally mind-blowing, but then now, we're staying fast at. We're coming for you, Kenny. Number 20, we're coming for you, right? Who does that, you guys? Who calls out the #1 team in EXP? Who does that? Right? This is February of 23 at Brent's event in Maui. Kenny was in the audience. I told him we're coming for you. 1 year later, in January of 2024, we're #1 on the leaderboard for units in the entire country. Right now, we're not there yet. We're not there right now, but we're hovering between 3 and 5. But 1 year later, we go from 20 to right on the heels of Kenny Fast and some of the biggest, most successful teams in the country. But it's because we spoke it into existence. Right? You got to do it from stage. You got to do it on a Zoom. You got to do it in front of people and not be ashamed of what you want to accomplish. So write it down today. When you hear some speaker that inspires you this week, speak it into existence, write it down and tell the people on your table. And then tell me. I want to hear at the end of tomorrow what you're gonna do, all right? Because this is what we're gonna do, you guys. We're gonna be the #1 team in EXP, and we're gonna do 1,000 units. All right, this is all my contact information, you guys. You can scan the code. If you ever need anything, there's links to book a call. I will help you with attraction. I will help you with coaching, whatever you need. If there's anything I can do, I've been helped so many times over. The least I can do is pay it back. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. Kona Broker on Instagram. Thank you, guys.